It looks like NHS reform is basically off the table, serious NHS reform, and the triple lock is off the table.
And what about the military? Because we've already heard, haven't we, that it would cause serious resignations if the military budget is cut.
Well, as far as I understand, they've reached some sort of a compromise. So it might not be 3% of defence spending, which is what Ben Wallace said was his red line for staying in government, 3% of GDP on defence spending. But it will increase a bit until 2026, when they're planning to put it up more. But these figures are so far in the future that it gets a bit ridiculous.
What about windfall tax?
Oh, yeah.
Windfall tax, yes. Rishi Sunak has decided to, well, again, not quite certain, but from everything that's going around, it sounds as though Rishi Sunak is going to extend the windfall tax on these big oil and gas companies. He's decided, looking at the figures, that it hasn't, that the worry was that it was going to prevent investment from these big companies into drilling projects, etc. But looking at the figures, it doesn't look like it is having that effect. So he's much more relaxed about extending that windfall tax or possibly raising it to 25%.
Because Labour have always sort of, I mean, they want the windfall tax, but they've always sort of said it's the financial solution to everything. So it seems.
So it does feel a bit as though Rishi Sunak is stealing Keir Starmer's clothes here, because if he does extend the windfall tax and do it, you know, in quite a dramatic way, quite a drastic way, it sounds like, it's quite hard to know what Labour are going to say, because at every point so far, Labour have said, no, we wouldn't cut health spending, we wouldn't cut defence spending, we wouldn't cut education spending, we'd just raise the windfall tax. And if Sunak's already going to do that, and there's still a big black hole in public finances, that makes it a little bit trickier for Labour.
But you still think that even if this next budget is OBR approved, they're going to try and force a debate on every single step?
So I gather.
Really go through this again.
So I gather, yes. And I think that's what we've got to expect, because, of course, the Opposition Day motion on the fracking ban was extraordinarily successful. That's the sort of parliamentary instrument, they call it. And it's a clever little trick by Labour. And it works so well that you sort of wonder, why would they not do it again?
But isn't there a sense with that, because it's being covered and because we're all becoming more aware of these things, aren't the general public at least have the potential to turn on Labour and say, you're stopping us sorting out some of these problems?
I think being optimistic about how much the majority of people are tuned in, you'll get big news watchers thinking, oh, this is a little trick that they played, like the fracking trick last time. But if, as most people, you have a busy job and politics isn't your main interest, you just turn on the 6 o'clock news in the evening or whatever and see Conservatives voting for cutting defence spending, cutting health spending, cutting education spending, those will be the headlines. And that's what people will take in.
Oh, it's a dirty game, isn't it?
Dirty, dirty game.